Ukraine watched for one mistake, Valdhay, then collapsed the battlefield.
The fields outside Donetsk lay silent at 7:40 in the morning. No wind, no movement, just the kind of stillness that comes before something breaks. The ground was still damp from overnight rain, and the air carried that metallic tension you can almost taste. The kind that makes soldiers check their rifles one more time, even when there's nothing to see yet. Then the horizon began to rumble. It started as a low vibration in the earth, felt before it was heard. Within seconds, the rumble became a roar. 50 T-80 battle tanks surged forward across the open farmland, each one a $3 million piece of Russian armor, engines screaming as treads carved through soil and grass. Behind them came 40 BTR armored personnel carriers, each worth roughly $1 million, packed with infantry ready to dismount and overwhelm whatever stood in their way. Nearly 1,200 Russian soldiers were deploying from what had once been a Ukrainian forward operating base, now abandoned, now theirs. Overhead, 60 suicide drones screamed toward the Ukrainian trenches and bunkers ahead, their descent sharp and purposeful. This wasn't a probing attack. This wasn't reconnaissance in force. This was a division-level armored assault designed to do one thing: rupture Ukraine's western defensive flank and collapse the entire Donetsk line in a single devastating blow. The engines roared louder. The drones shrieked as they dove. The column advanced with the kind of momentum that looks from the outside like unstoppable force. Dust rose in great plumes behind the tanks. The ground shook under the weight of hundreds of tons of steel moving at speed. To any observer, this was overwhelming combat power, raw, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. But what looked like unstoppable force was actually something else entirely. It was exposure. And this moment, this exact convergence of timing, terrain, and tactical deception was about to become a case study in how modern warfare has fundamentally changed. Before we go further, I want you to do something. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching this from. Are you in Europe, North America, somewhere else entirely? I want to know who's paying attention to what's unfolding here, because what happens next matters far beyond this battlefield. Now, here's what you need to understand. This ambush didn't begin when the first mine detonated. It began days earlier. Ukrainian intelligence had detected the Russian buildup almost as soon as it started. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, drone reconnaissance, every tool in the modern intelligence toolkit pointed to the same conclusion. A massive armored assault was coming. The question wasn't if, it was when and where and how to respond. Ukraine made a choice that defied conventional military doctrine. They didn't mass their own armor to meet the attack. They didn't reinforce the forward trenches with additional infantry. They didn't even prepare a visible defense. They responded with silence. While Russian commanders finalized their attack plans, Ukrainian combat engineers were working through the night. Over 4,200 anti-tank mines were planted across the fields, carefully, methodically, in patterns that would look random to aerial reconnaissance, but were anything but. Each mine cost a few $100s. Each one was positioned to destroy targets worth millions. Fake farm roads were constructed. Escape lanes that looked clear were prepared with delayed trigger mines, calibrated to detonate not when the first vehicle passed over them, but when the third or fourth did. Hours of preparation went into creating the illusion of emptiness, the appearance of an undefended approach. No patrols, no visible activity, no warning, just silence. And then the Russian column entered the kill zone. The first T-90 tank, worth roughly $4 million, triggered a mine. The explosion was catastrophic. The turret, all 15 tons of hardened steel and composite armor, was launched over 100 feet into the air, tumbling end over end before slamming back into the earth 200 meters away. The blast sent a shockwave rippling across the field, a physical punch that could be felt in the chest, even from a distance. That explosion wasn't just the destruction of a tank, it was the signal. Secondary mines began detonating in rapid sequence, one after another like fiery dominoes falling in perfect terrible rhythm. The Russian formation, which had maintained textbook spacing and discipline just seconds before, fractured instantly. Vehicles swerved. Commanders shouted contradictory orders. The perfect geometric advance collapsed into chaos. BTRs veered sharply. Drivers desperate to avoid the mines they could now see were everywhere. But those escape routes, those clear corridors between the explosions, were exactly where the Ukrainians wanted them to go. The delayed trigger mines had been positioned with brutal precision. As the third and fourth vehicles in each fleeing group crossed what looked like safe ground, the earth erupted beneath them. Explosions rippled outward, each one claiming another armored vehicle, another piece of multi-million-dollar equipment reduced to burning scrap. Discipline collapsed. Tanks spun in place, throwing up walls of dirt as they tried to reverse course. Soldiers leaped from personnel carriers and dove for cover amid the shockwaves, scrambling through mud and smoke. What had been a clean, coordinated advance just 90 seconds earlier had become a chaotic, panicked retreat into an even deadlier trap. Then Phase 2 began. Ukrainian FPV drones came in low and fast, skimming just meters above the ground. Each drone cost roughly $800. They had been assembled by volunteers in workshops and basements, fitted with shaped charges, programmed with simple waypoints. They were not sophisticated, they were not expensive, but they were effective. The drones didn't just strike armor, they were sent to specific coordinates where additional explosive charges had been buried beneath the surface. When a drone detonated its payload, it triggered those secondary charges directly under Russian vehicles. The combined blasts amplified the destruction already underway. The earth cracked open repeatedly across the field, each detonation creating a crater large enough to swallow a truck. Ukrainian recon drones, circling higher above, identified the Russian command vehicle, a modified BTR bristling with communications antennas. FPV drones were redirected immediately. They struck directly into the cabin, punching through the light armor and detonating inside. The command vehicle erupted in flames. Inside, the battalion's communications network, its maps, its encrypted radios, its ability to coordinate the assault, all of it was destroyed in an instant. Without command, the attack dissolved. Individual units began making their own decisions, following their own survival instincts rather than any coherent plan, and those instincts drove them deeper into the trap. The corridors that looked clear, the routes that appeared to offer escape, were delayed trigger mine funnels. As Russian vehicles poured into them, the third and fourth vehicles in each column exploded, blocking the way forward with burning wreckage. Tanks reversed blindly, colliding with APCs behind them. Infantry fled into open fields, where they became visible targets against the bare ground. And overhead, Ukrainian drones dominated the sky. Every vehicle was marked in real time. Every attempted escape was tracked. Nothing was allowed to leave. Then the smoke began to blanket the battlefield, thick and black and choking, rising in columns that could be seen for miles. Ukraine had been preparing Phase 3 for weeks. Artillery batteries had already pre-registered every grid coordinate across this stretch of farmland. The guns knew exactly where to fire before a single Russian vehicle crossed the line of departure. Now, here's a question I want you to think about as we watch this unfold. Three possible outcomes were on the table at this moment. Ukraine holds the line and bleeds the assault dry. Russia pushes through with sheer numbers and breaks the defense. Or the drones decide the outcome entirely, rendering traditional concepts of offense and defense obsolete. What do you think happened? The answer became clear when the M777 howitzers opened fire. Positioned 12 kilometers away, hidden in tree lines and camouflage positions, the American-made howitzers, each worth roughly $3 million, began their work. The killbox grids had been prepared for weeks, refined with every piece of intelligence gathered about Russian movement patterns and likely avenues of approach. Now those grids were being executed with cold precision. The 155mm shells didn't saturate the area. They struck the center mass. High explosive rounds targeted clusters of disabled vehicles, splitting armor and igniting ammunition stores. Then came the Excalibur rounds, GPS-guided artillery shells worth $70,000 each, adjusting their trajectory mid-flight to hit specific targets with precision that would have been impossible just 20 years ago. Fuel trucks were priority targets. When an Excalibur struck one, the explosion was visible from orbit. A BTR vanished in a single direct hit, simply ceasing to exist in a fraction of a second. A fuel hauler ignited, the blast creating a fireball that rolled across the ground like a living thing, consuming everything it touched. The entire battlefield was lit orange, shadows dancing wildly as the inferno spread. Smoke and fire choked out the sunlight. The temperature spiked. Metal glowed red, but the artillery wasn't firing blind. Recon drones circled overhead, adjusting fire in real time. When infrared cameras detected clusters of infantry regrouping behind cover, coordinates were transmitted instantly. Ukrainian 2S-1 Gvozdika self-propelled howitzers, Soviet-era weapons that had been in service since the 1970s, obliterated those positions with rapid salvos. The old guns still worked just fine. Russian units tried to escape the kill box, but every attempted withdrawal pushed them deeper into the prepared fire zones. The smoke, the dust, the fire, it all choked their communications. Radios crackled with static and screaming. Orders dissolved into noise. The mechanized assault, which had begun with such overwhelming force just minutes earlier, collapsed completely. And here's the truth that military analysts would spend months discussing afterward. The drones weren't supporting the artillery. The artillery was executing drone intelligence. The minefield wasn't the main weapon. It was a trap to hold the enemy in place. The artillery wasn't the killing blow. It was there to finish what the drones had started. Every phase was interconnected, each one setting up the next, creating a layered defense that turned Russian strength into catastrophic weakness. Then Phase 4 began, and Ukrainian infantry emerged from concealment. They came from tree lines, from abandoned warehouses, from storm drains and irrigation ditches. Small, disciplined strike teams, moving with the kind of practice coordination that comes from months of training and weeks of rehearsal for this exact scenario. They knew the terrain, they knew the plan, they knew where the mines were and where the safe corridors ran. Mobile anti-tank teams carried American Javelins worth $200,000 each, British NLOWs worth $40,000, Swedish Carl Gustavs that had been in service since the Cold War. Some teams moved on motorbikes, others used civilian quad bikes, racing across the battlefield at high speed, firing from cover, then vanishing before return fire could be organized. Hit and fade. Strike and disappear. Never stay still long enough to become a target. Russian tanks were destroyed one by one, picked apart by weapons that cost a fraction of what the tanks themselves were worth. Recovery vehicles that attempted to tow damaged armor back to safety were targeted immediately. A Ukrainian Stugna P missile, fired from over 2 kilometers away, blocked the final corridor with a burning wreck. Ukrainian electronic warfare units jammed every frequency Russian forces were using. Calls for air support went into the void. Requests for artillery counter-battery fire were never received. The Russians were fighting blind, deaf, and alone, while Ukrainian forces had complete situational awareness of everything happening across the entire battlefield. The rout began in earnest. Soldiers abandoned their vehicles and ran. The wounded were left behind, crying out for help that would not come. Men fled into canals and ditches, crawling through mud and water, trying to put distance between themselves and the killing ground behind them. From above, from the perspective of Ukrainian reconnaissance drones circling at altitude, the destruction was total. 4.5 miles of farmland had been transformed into a graveyard of burning metal and scorched earth. The smoke was so thick, so vast, that it showed up on weather satellites as a distinct feature. An entire Russian brigade, thousands of men, hundreds of vehicles, the pride of Moscow's armored doctrine, had been erased in less than 3 hours. The leadership was gone. The rescue forces were destroyed. Communications were severed. And still, incomprehensibly, a second wave was ordered forward. Fresh T-92 tanks and fuel convoys were deployed from the rear, driving straight into the same layered defenses that had annihilated the first assault. Ukrainian Switchblade drones, loitering kamikaze munitions that cost roughly $6,000 each, struck the fuel trucks before they could even reach the main battlefield. The horizon ignited like a second sunrise, red and orange and furious. The entire eastern flank was consumed by fire that burned so hot it could be felt half a kilometer away. Ukraine's 92nd Assault Brigade, which had been held in reserve, launched a counter-thrust against the Russian flanks. They moved through sunflower fields that concealed their approach until they were practically on top of their targets. Survivors of the initial assault were hunted systematically, surrounded, and given the choice to surrender or die. Most surrendered,